Thanks for sharing that, Nick. I know it's true that it's a lot easier. I think of the classroom as well. It's a lot easier to just pound someone over the head when they do something wrong than it is to. It takes effort to look for something good and try to bring that person up. And but that is often what changes those people, those students. So when someone believes in them, because very often they don't believe in themselves, and they feel like they're failing and they feel like failures. And it takes effort to look at someone that's not doing well and finding something good. And I've had students where you had to look very hard to find something good. And it took a few days until something good came out. But there's always something there. And we can give people courage that way. So I really appreciated that. I want to look this morning a little bit more at the life of David and one aspect of his life. I titled this talk, "The Service of Leadership." And I want to turn this to 1 Samuel 22. I just want to read, start with two verses there. 1 Samuel 22. And it says there, David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him. And he became a captain over them. And they were with him about 400 men. And when we think of David, we often think of King David reigning in Jerusalem with his might, with his armies, laying up gold and silver for Solomon to build a temple. Israel's greatest king, Israel's benchmark as a king. This is what we think of often. But David didn't start there. And I look at these couple verses here, and I say, you know what? This is a motley crew. This is what you call a motley crew. You know, the distressed, the discontented, the indebted. This wasn't glamorous. This wasn't glorious. This wasn't leading an army with banners. This wasn't leading out of a palace or fortress. It was living in the forests, in caves. This reminded me of Robin Hood, you know, in the Sherwood Forest trying to escape from the sheriff of Nottingham. These people were like society's outcasts. And he went out and raided surrounding towns of the enemies of Israel. And there he is, with this group of men that are kind of nobodies. They're nobodies. But they followed him, and he became their captain. And so this is our introduction to David as a leader. That is where his leadership begins, in obscurity, away from the accolades, no pomp and ceremony. This is where he starts. And a couple questions is, why speak about leadership? And I thought about that, and I had a simple answer that I came to is, the world needs more leaders. And but that leads us to another question. What is a leader? And you'd ask a lot of different people, and they'd give you a lot of different answers. And the definition to me that's just very simple and resounds with me is a leader is someone with a follower. Right? Someone follows you, you're a leader. What is a follower then? What is a follower? What does it mean to be a follower of someone? And I recently explored this concept with some of my students in the morning. We were talking about following Jesus and what it means to follow Jesus. What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? And that we say we're followers of Jesus, but that often tends to become like a vague, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, but what does that actually mean to be a follower of Jesus? And so I thought of this example. This illustration. I used Dave Ramsey. Now I'll give you some of the basic teachings of Dave Ramsey. You shouldn't have a credit card. Don't borrow money unless it's for a mortgage for a house. Don't finance things. Pay cash and have a budget. Right? It's basically, there's a few other things, but it kind of sums it up. And if I say, I'm a follower of Dave Ramsey, I do those things, right? I do those things because that's what he says. I do those things. But if I don't do those things, I can't say I'm a follower of Dave Ramsey. I can listen to him, I can read his book, but unless I do what he says, I can't claim to be a follower. And that applies to following Jesus. Right? What did Jesus teach? We look at Matthew chapter 5 and we say, Jesus says to give alms. He says to pray. He says to love your enemies. He says to fast. He says we should lay up treasures in heaven. It says a lot of things, right? And so, am I a follower of Jesus? Well, if I'm a follower of Jesus, if I do what he says to do, right? I think that picture made it clear in my mind. I follow Jesus if I do what he says I should do. That could make me a follower. I can listen to him, I can like him, I can do a lot of things, but unless I do what he says, I can't claim to be a follower. Now, if I follow some other person, that means I do what that person says, right? So if there's a certain person that it might be your father, it might be a pastor, it might be your boss at work, but if you follow that person, you do what that person tells you to do. If you follow someone that has influence in your life, so that is very much what a leader is. A leader is a person that can influence you, that influences you. Very much our first leaders in our lives are our fathers, and they influence us, and what he says and does has a lot of meaning and significance to me because I'm following this person. I'm following what he says. And so what he thinks is actually really important to me, and how he feels about certain things is really important to me. And I think it's important to ask him for advice, and I think it's important to wait until he gives me a go-ahead. That person is someone who I've put myself under, and I've let that person lead me. If that person gives me advice, I'm very likely to follow it. If that person says, you know what, you probably shouldn't buy that vehicle, okay. I'm going to be okay with that. That person has influence with me. And leaders have influence. People follow them. We imitate them. Jesus is one of the greatest leaders in history. And we ask the question, what would Jesus do? What would he do? How would he live? And that's what I'm going to do. People ask the question, what would Dave do in this situation? And they act accordingly. We could ask the question, what would Harry do in this situation? And and act accordingly, because I know what his beliefs are, his values, and I want to follow that. That is what it means to be a follower. It goes deeper than just doing what a person says, right? It goes really to the heart. You know, I don't just follow a list of, oh, Jesus said this, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, right? I go for his heart. Why does Jesus want me to act like this? Why does my dad want me to be like this? Why does Harry want me to be like this? Why do I? And I try to figure it out, and I try to get to the heart of what he's trying to do and why he's doing it, and I wrestle with that. That person is influencing me, that person is shaping me, that person is leading me. That's what it means to be a follower. You know, I follow Jesus, not just do what he says, but I want to be like him. That's what it means to be a follower. And so all of us are followers of somebody, and most of us are leaders of somebody. And many of us are leaders in some sense. We may lead a team, a classroom, a home, a business, a church, a small group, or we may simply have influence on someone's life. And others may turn to you for advice, we model their behavior. We like what we see, and so we model their behavior. And part of the call here this morning is we all need to become better leaders for the sake of those who are coming after us and for the sake of those who we influence. And that's really the heart behind what I'm sharing today, is not so much looking at you or me as a leader, but looking at those around us, the ones that God has called us to serve. What does it mean to influence in a positive way? And fortunately, what we have today is the ultimate guide for leadership right in our hands. We have many inspirational heroes and examples to learn from. And looking at the life of David, there's 3 points I want to look at and give us 3 challenges. The first one is simply, are we willing to serve here like David did in the place I just read? Are we willing to serve when we're unnoticed? Is that when we're willing to lead? When we're unnoticed? When it's unpopular, maybe uncomfortable? Are we willing to serve in those situations where there's no accolades? You know, the position that nobody really wants. Are we willing to do that, the dirty work? We see what needs to get done, and we do it. He became captain over them. He became captain over them. Again, not a glamorous position, but going back to my title, leadership, I think we've misconstrued it very often to be a position of power and authority. And I think the Bible really teaches very clearly that leadership is not that, it's service. And that means doing the hard things that really no one else wants to do or feel likes doing, but that falls to us. All right, so first is, are we willing to serve when we're unnoticed, when we're unpopular, when it's unpopular, even when it's uncomfortable, like David did here in 1 Samuel 22. The second one we find, I'm going to page forward a few chapters to chapter 30. This is where David comes back from going out with the Philistines, and he comes back to Ziklag and finds the city burnt with fire. And everyone's taken captive. And it says, I'm going to read some of it here, and David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, and the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They didn't slay any, neither great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken. There was nobody there. There was no dead bodies. There was just nobody in the city, and the city was burnt. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's 2 wives were taken captive. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because of the soul of all the people were grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. And David sent to Abiathar a priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray, bring me the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod. So as I'm speaking here, I'm not sure who all I'm going to be speaking to. Not everything I say might apply to you, but I trust at least one of these points will inspire you to grow, to reach for higher ground. Some of these points I thought maybe could be more directed to youth, to those who aspire to leadership, some to people in leadership already, but to all. I hope that this motivates you to lift up in prayer the leaders you have in your life. They are placed by God in your life to serve you. They look out for your best interest and to guide you closer to heaven each day. That task is monumentous. It's huge, and it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. All right, so I just want to contrast what David did here, right? He came back. Everybody wants to stone him. People want to kill him. Their leader, they want to stone the leader, David. The people who are with him, there's 600 of them at this point. And everyone's grieving because their families are gone, and I completely understand that feeling and that sentiment. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God, and he said to the priest, bring the ephod. What does God have to say about this? And I found it interesting that a couple chapters earlier, if you go to chapter 27, David's being hunted by Saul here. And in chapter 27, it starts off this way. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. And then Saul's going to give up. I'm going to go to the Philistines, and Saul's going to give up chasing me. And he goes and he lives with the Philistines. Now, if you read the next couple chapters, what David does here is fairly interesting. He's going out and he's still fighting, and he's sending raiding parties to this place and that place. And he didn't want Achish, who was the king in Gath, where David was, to know what he was doing. And so it says, David saved neither man nor woman alive to bring tidings to Gath, saying, lest they should tell on us, saying, so did David, and so will his manner be. In fact, David told Achish that, you know what, I've been fighting in Judah, in the south of Judah, and this and that. And Achish says, you know what, this is great. David's going to be hated by his countrymen. They're going to hate them for this. And he's going to be loyal to me forever. And David became very, very close to Achish. In fact, he became Achish's bodyguard. And when the Philistines mobilized to go attack Saul, obviously David is coming with him. Achish is taking David with him. Not a question. David is coming with me. David and his men are standing there, and the whole Philistine army is marching by the hundreds and by the thousands in front of David. And David's bringing up the rear with the king. He's literally become the bodyguard to Achish. He said, here's the words, therefore will I make thee keeper of my head forever. So Achish believed David was loyal to him. David was being deceptive here. He wasn't telling Achish what he was doing. And his whole time here is kind of marked by this deceit. And he's with the Philistines, and things are better. Saul's not hunting him. And, there's relative peace and quiet. But let's go back to Ziklag now. And the men in this case, blamed David for what had happened. They said, David, we're going to stone you. It's your fault. And that's really often what happens when something goes wrong, is whoever's in charge gets blamed. I always had the perspective of, well, it's not David's fault, right? They were gone, and these Amalekites came when David wasn't there. And what could he have really done about it? And but I asked the question, and had it really been the right thing in the first place to move to the Philistine territory? You know, it seemed like a good decision at the time. But if you read chapter 27, who did David consult about moving to the Philistine lands? His own heart. David said in his heart, I'm going to perish, and I need to get out of here. Go back to chapter 30, and he's like, Abiathar, bring the ephod. What does God have to say about what we're supposed to do next? What's the next step? So we could maybe pin the fault on David. He had certainly not consulted the Lord when he moved to Ziklag, and now this had happened. But no matter how you look at it, David got the blame, and his own men are now in mutiny and ready to take his life, ready to take him out. And he calls on God for answers, and he does what the Lord directs him to do. And upon victory, he shares his spoils not only with the elders of Judah who are around him, but also with the soldiers who had stayed behind. There was 200 of the 600 soldiers said, you know what, David, we can't keep going. We got to stay here. We're too tired. We're exhausted. We just came back from 3 days of travel, coming back from the Philistines, 3 days there. We can't keep going, David. And two of them sat down and says, you know, we're going to stay here. And David said, all right, stay here. We're going to keep going. And he kept pursuing. And when he came back, he said, you know what, all 600 of us, we're going to share equally in the spoil. It doesn't matter if you stayed behind. It doesn't matter if you came with us. He shares the spoils with soldiers who are too weak to stay behind, and also the elders of Judah. What can we learn from this? I'm not going to quote this directly, but I read this somewhere else, and it says a leader takes all the blame when something goes wrong and shares all the glory when he wins. And that's, often when I thought about, being in charge, being the leader when I was young, I was like, it looks good. There's appeal there. There's something, right? Being in charge, it feels like there's something there, right? It's something in us that's like, yes, I want that. But as we look at this, are we willing to take the blame? Are we willing to share the glory? Are we willing to take the responsibility for failure? Are we willing to own it and acknowledge our mistakes? Because, mistakes, sometimes we think leaders should be perfect and they should not make mistakes. But mistakes are not the end. We can't change where we're at right now, but we can change the end of the story. Or as C.S. Lewis once said, he said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are right now and change the ending. And the thing that also struck me about this is, am I consulting the Lord? Am I wondering, what does God want me to do in this situation? Or am I just consulting my own heart? Am I going by my feelings? Am I going by what I feel like? I'm tired of running away from Saul. I'm tired of just being on the run. Give me some peace. And we consult our own hearts, our own feelings, our own desires, instead of consulting the Lord and asking, what does God want me to do in this situation? What does God want me to do? And so leadership is not this glorious, glamorous thing. Often we have to take the blame and share all the glory. That's number two. The third one, if we keep reading here, I'm going to turn up to 2 Samuel, the first chapter. And this is after the death of Saul. And David's still in Ziklag, and this guy comes to him and says, I was there when Saul died. In fact, I killed him. Here's his crown. Here's his signet. Here's his stuff. I have proof. And I took his life. I killed your enemy. And he asked me to do it. And David took hold on his clothes and rent them, and the men with him, and they mourned and wept and fasted for Saul and for Jonathan and for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen with the sword. And then David said to this young man that come, where are you from? Who are you? He says, I'm the son of a stranger. I'm an Amalekite. And I want you to note this verse. And David said to him, how hast thou not afraid to stretch forth your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? He says, why were you not afraid to do that? Now, this man was not telling the truth. He had not killed Saul at all, but that's what he had said. And so David took his story and says, how are you not afraid? How are you not afraid to stretch your hands forth and destroy the Lord's anointed? How did you dare do that? And we look at David's life and the pattern of his life up till now. He had many, many opportunities where he could have struck Saul down. He had many times could have killed Saul. He had multiple opportunities. His men encouraged him to do it. David, here he is. God has put you in your hands. Look, he's right there. Easy target. No one's going to know. Just end this struggle. And David could have argued that, Saul's poor leadership would ruin Israel and the Philistines would take over. And really God's Spirit had already left Saul and come upon David. He was anointed king himself. But David's character, as he's on the run from Saul, as he's on the run from the man trying to kill him, is one of continual respect and high regard for the office that Saul was occupying. He was saying, God anointed this person king. God put Saul in this place. And he realized that this position was given to Saul by God, and it was not right for him to take it away. Even though Saul was trying to kill David, David showed him the utmost respect and honor. And that's an incredible example of honor and dignity, of respect, meekness, incredible power under control. What strength David possessed. Saul was far from who he was when he became king. Far, far, far removed. He had gone from being a good king to consulting witches for advice. He had really fallen. And envy had taken hold of Saul, and he wanted to destroy his own faithful servant. He had completely lost it. And yet David treated him with incredible honor, with incredible respect, with dignity that we would argue Saul did not deserve. We would say Saul did not deserve that. And so what can we learn from that? These are incredibly hard things, right? The person that's supposed to be the leader is trying to destroy me. And David sets an incredible example here of honor for what God had put in place. And so learn to submit, learn to surrender. And these are things that the earlier we learn them in life, the better. That we don't push our own way, that we learn to lay things down. Even when this did not make any sense for David to keep honoring Saul. It made no sense. Why? I think we can all fairly say we have authorities that are better than that. And if David can show that level of respect and honor and high regard for the position Saul had, then so can we. Why is that so important? Why is this so critical? You know, one of the 10 commandments is honor your father and your mother. Like this is like the foundation bedrock, the 10 commandments. Honor thy father and thy mother. Why is that so critical? Why is it so important? And you know, things like information. Sometimes I've seen this in my students. They think they're better than their parents because they know English better, because they have more information, they have more knowledge, they're more educated. And but in today's world, information and knowledge are very readily available, like accelerating how quickly you can have answers, just at the unbelievably fast, especially with new AI models like ChatGPT. You can have instant access to almost anything basically immediately. Any question, any knowledge, you can do anything with them. So knowledge has become cheapened by that. But what is still at a premium, what is still super important in today's world is wisdom. Wisdom is not so readily available because it's born out of experience, it's born out of life and living life and making mistakes. You know, wisdom is kind of like, you know, as technology is advanced, we use large machines and advanced technology to do work that we used to use shovels and picks for and hammers, right? We used to use that. But wisdom is still found with shovels and picks and hammers. There's a slow process. There's no click it and you got it with wisdom. There's no 2-day shipping with wisdom. It takes time. It takes years. And it takes living life out day after day under the burdens and the cares of life. And knowledge is easily had. And you may have the knowledge to have excellent problem-solving skills. You can figure things out, and you can make things work. And it looks like, you know, these people that are older than me can't do it as quickly and as well as I can. But there are pattern recognition skills that come from age. You know what? It's like, you know what? I've seen this before. I've heard that before. There's really nothing new here. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I've been there. Right? You can't chat GPT that. That is valuable, invaluable experience that we need to navigate life. And it's for that reason that one of the foundational things in life is to learn to honor our father and mother and those God has placed in our life. We ignore it. We ignore this wisdom that will help us navigate life in our own generation. Each generation has its own unique challenges, but it's the wisdom of the past that will help us navigate the future. It will give us a reference point from which to make good decisions from. We ignore it to our own peril. Wisdom is learning from sitting at the feet. Wisdom is learned from sitting at the feet of those who've gone before us. Maybe they're 20 years before us, or 10, or 30, or 40. So wisdom can come to us from putting ourselves at the feet of those who've gone before, or wisdom can come to us from behind, but it carries with it very often regret. Wisdom can come from behind, but it often carries regret with it. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. And the other thing, as when we're young, we often push. We want certain things to happen, and we want to be this and that, and we want it now. And another thing I think it's important to learn from David here is patience. Your time will come. Your time will come when someone will be pushing on you. Very much so. So be patient. Wait. Learn to lead in obscurity. Learn to be faithful where you are. Be willing to serve unnoticed and unthanked. But be faithful where you are. Be fruitful. Don't just idly wait. Yeah, someday I'll have my chance, and someday we'll find ourselves wholly unprepared in that day when we are called to rise up. And so our time will come, and we need the wisdom, and we need to cultivate this thing of honor and respect those that God has put in place to lead, shepherd, and help us in life. So those are the three things here. Number one, learn to lead in obscurity. Be willing to serve where no one notices and no one claps for you. That's a good place to start. The second one is be willing to take the blame. Be willing to say it's my fault. It's something we have to learn. We always want to push it to someone else. From a little child, we say, "He made me do it. She did it first." We do that from young on, and it's hard for us it's hard for me to say, you know what, I dropped the ball. Part of the reason I was late today was that I quickly had to go snowblow my driveway to get out. I opened my garage door and drove out, and you know what, I don't think I can make it through there. It's like almost a foot of snow, and just this soft, heavy, blown in snow. I don't think I can make it. And if I had really been on the ball, I would have looked out the window, because last night I said, you know what, my driveway's probably, the south wind blowing, is probably going to drift over again. I snowblowed it yesterday, and it's probably going to drift over again. Sure enough. And so while I was supposed to be driving to church, I had to go snowblow my driveway. Well, you know what? I can blame this and that, the wind, the weather. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I dropped the ball. Should have been something that was there. And that's okay. We all make mistakes, and but we can learn from them, we can grow from them. I want to turn to a passage in the New Testament in closing here, 1 Timothy chapter 3. As I think of leadership, over the years it becomes less and less desirable. It's like, you know what, it's not something I really want to do. I'd rather not. And because it looks like an awful lot of hard work. And then it's pictured in the Bible as service and taking the low road and the servant of all, and all of that language surrounds leadership in the Bible. And it's like, you know what, as much as we'd like the honor and the prestige and all of that, I think, anyway, for myself, I'd rather shrink away from it. I'd rather not. It looks like an awful lot of work. It looks like an awful lot of responsibility to be, to be a father, to be a to be anything. It just looks hard. And I'd rather just shrink away from that. I'd rather just not do it. And but then someone pointed out this verse to me. He says, but what about, it says, he who desires the office of a bishop desires a good work, desires a good thing. So if you want to be in charge, if you want to be in leadership, and you desire it, you're desiring a good thing. It's like, okay. And that kind of really helped shift my way of thinking around this whole subject. And I hope that you will find it helpful as well. You know, the Bible does paint leadership as a good thing, as a worthy goal, as something to be desired. But I found that it's different than what I would have thought it looked like. And so I want to read some of this here in 1 Timothy 3. I'm going to read it from the Amplified Version. It puts a lot more words in there. It helps us give a lot more adjectives and stuff like that to describe what Paul's saying here. I'm not going to read all of it, but I want to read a few verses here. 1 Timothy 3. The saying is true and irrefutable. If a man eagerly seeks the office of bishop or superintendent or overseer, if a man seeks the office of overseer, he desires an excellent task. He desires an excellent work. Okay, so if a person wants to be in leadership, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But I feel like Paul's saying here, you want to be an overseer? That's good. It's good. Good for you. You have good and noble ambitions. There's nothing wrong with your ambitions. They're good. But here are the conditions of your leadership. And you read here, and it's like, gulp. Is it going to be that hard? Is it going to be that difficult? Really, Paul? All this? Now a bishop, the overseer, must give no grounds for accusation, but must be above reproach. The husband of one wife, circumspect and temperate and self-controlled. He must be sensible and well-behaved and dignified and lead an orderly, disciplined life. He must be hospitable, showing love for and being a friend to the believers, especially strangers or foreigners, and be capable and qualified teacher. Not given to wine, not combative, but gentle and considerate. Not quarrelsome, but forbearing and peaceable. And not a lover of money, insatiable for wealth, and ready to obtain it by questionable means. He must rule his own household well, keeping his children under control, with true dignity, commending their respect in every way, and keeping them respectful. For if a man does not know how to rule his own household, how is he to take care of the church of God? He must not be a new convert, or he may develop a beclouded and stupid state of mind, as the result of pride, be blinded by conceit, and fall into the condemnation that the devil once did. Furthermore, he must have a good reputation and be well thought of by those outside the church, lest he become involved in slander and incur reproach and fall into the devil's trap. In the like manner, the deacons must be worthy of respect, not shifty and double talkers, but sincere in what they say, not given to much wine, not greedy for base gain, craving wealth, and resorting to ignoble and dishonest methods of getting it. They must possess the mystic secret of the faith, Christian truth as hidden from ungodly men, with a clear conscience. And let them be tried and investigated and proved first. Then, if they turn out to be above reproach, let them serve as deacons. The women likewise must be worthy of respect and serious, not gossipers, but temperate and self-controlled, truly trustworthy in all things. Let deacons be the husbands of one wife, and let them manage their children and their own households well. For those who perform well as deacons acquire a good standing for themselves and gain much confidence and freedom and boldness in the faith which is founded on and centers in Jesus Christ. And I read that, and I was like, okay, all that, And Paul says, yes, there's a price to pay. You know, you want that position? That's good. Here's the price you have to pay. It's kind of like a young man says, you know, I'd like to get married to that girl. Okay, sure. But here's what you're going to have to do. Here's how you're going to have to live. Here's the kind of person you're going to have to be. So it's kind of like, you want to be a leader? Sure, that's good. Go for it. But here's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like. And I just want to throw out to all of us, and I'm thinking maybe especially of the young men here. I'd like to put out a holy challenge to all of you here. And ask you this question. Are you going to be a leader? Do you desire the office of an overseer? Do you desire it? I want you to desire it. I want you to want it. I want you to go after it. Because it's going to shape your life. It's going to mold your life. It's going to make you live a certain way that's going to make you, in the most possible way like Jesus. Because look, what do we have here? Right? Look at some of these things on the list. We're going to have to be faithful men. It says the husband of one wife. No other loves. There's no other this and that and other entanglements and other loves. No. The husband of one wife. A disciplined life. Self-controlled. Honest. Ethical. Living in such a way that you command respect from those who know you most intimately, your own family. And I hope and pray that as you look up at that mountain and say, you know what, I'm not there. I'm not even close. I don't know how I'm going to get up there. But as you look at that mountain that you need to climb, as you gaze on that challenge squarely in the eyes, that challenge does not crush you or paralyze you with fear and doubt. Self-doubt. I don't think I can do this. This looks too much for me. But that you say with Caleb of old, give me that mountain. I'm not there yet, but by the grace of God, I'm climbing. That's my benchmark. That's what I just read. That's where I'm going. This world is in desperate need of Davids. In desperate need of those who will give their lives in faithful service for their generation. Those who live in quiet but constant courage, where your own doubts scream at you the loudest, but you refuse to sit down. You refuse to quit. You refuse to give up. You will stand and you will be counted among the faithful. Let's close with the words of our Lord Jesus in Matthew 25, chapter 20, verse 25. He says it this way. You know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they are a great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you. But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. For the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. Leadership is service. It is not control. It is not being on top and in charge. It is working with God to lead those in your care. It is being a faithful example with your life. It is walking the walk. It's hard. It is hard. And you know what? It's terrifying sometimes. But you know what? So is the alternative. What if my family has no one to lead them? Where will they end up? Where will they go? The alternative is also terrifying. So choose your hard. Choose your hard. Get going. Start climbing that mountain. I think Paul really laid out for us where we need to go. It gives us a roadmap for life. Start climbing. Take courage and lead.